Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.
Very warm welcome to Never Mind the Dambusters, the podcast that goes beyond aircraft and operations to explore the people, decisions and consequences behind the air war and the Second World War. I'm Jen Gulliford, and it's wonderful to have you with us once again. Now, this episode feels like a bit of a milestone because I'm delighted to say I'm once again, finally, joined by my co-host, James Jefferies, who's been away from the podcast for a little while. James, it's really great to have you back. How are you, and how does it feel to be back behind the microphone?
It's great to be back. It does feel like ages. And I mean, we had some technical issues with me logging on to begin with, and I thought I was cursed for a second that I wasn't, destined to come back. But yeah, just very quickly, thank you for people that have sent messages and emails wishing me well. It really is appreciated, and honestly, it means so much. So very, very briefly, what happened to me was I got food poisoning in Mexico for just over a week. I was okay. Then I caught a virus, which was fever, high temperature. I was in bed. That turned into a chest infection and pneumonia. So I was off for a long time with that. On top of that, I had an abscessed tooth and I had to have an emergency dental procedure on it. And yeah, just been recovering from that. But I am much better. I'm full of energy. I'm just slowly catching up with everything, apart from the FX Bristol blending, which is still sitting there, still staring at me, but I will get on with it soon. And I had a good meeting with my PhD supervisors recently, so that's on track. That's all good. But the main thing is I'm back on the pod, Jane. I'm here. I'm back again.
That is the main thing, and what a relief it is, I can tell you.
Exactly.
I feel like I've been struggling without you, I must admit. But anyway, it's great to have you back. I've certainly missed you, and I know our listeners have too. So, for today's episode, well, Never Mind the Dambusters usually focuses on RAF Bomber Command for obvious reasons. We've always tried to place that story within the wider Allied air effort. And today we're turning our attention to the American perspective on the air war and one of the most dramatic and costly chapters in the US Army Air Force's bombing campaign over Europe. To help us explore this subject in depth, we're joined by an absolutely fantastic guest. So our focus today is on the US 8th Air Force raids on Schweinfurt, among the most consequential and controversial bombing missions of 1943, with far-reaching implications for how the United States Army Air Force fought the air war. I'm delighted to say we're joined by Mike Peters, co-host of the Mighty 8th podcast, a show dedicated to the people, machines and missions of the US 8th Air Force. Mike, welcome to Never Mind the Dambusters. It's absolutely great to have you with us.
In the spirit of the Allied cooperation, it's even greater to be with you guys. I've really been looking forward to this.
Now, I asked Mike for a bio just before this episode began. When I read Mike's bio, which you just sent through, I just realised that we could do a whole episode just on your career. So before we dive into Schweinfurt itself, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and about your work on the Mighty 8th podcast and what first drew you to studying the history of the US 8th Air Force in such depth?
Well, wow. So my background is military. I was in the Army Air Corps for 34 years, from 1980 to 2013. My last 2 years were with the RAF Tornado Force as the Army liaison officer. Before I did attack helicopter and all kinds of other things. So through that time, I've done all of the operations you would expect, all the wars that happened in that time. So Northern Ireland, Gulf War 1, Gulf War 2, the Balkans, Afghanistan, all those things. So I spent a lot of my time training other people to be air door gunners and being a door gunner myself. So that's part of one of the jigsaws in the piece was I had an empathy with the guys who were air gunners in the aircraft. Obviously, I never flew at that height. Being a helicopter gunner, I was much lower down in the weeds. But using a machine gun out of an aircraft was more Royal Flying Corps than it was US Army Air Force or Royal Air Force Block Command. But anyway, so I had a bit of an affinity there. During that time, because I was Army Air Corps, I was very, very lucky to meet a lot of glider pilot, World War II veterans from Glider Pilot Regiment. And I was the Army Air Corps project officer at Peckin's Bridge for nearly 20 years. And that got me into the Glider Pilot Regiment and also into battlefield studies and battlefield tours, which is what I've done ever since then, since the early 80s. And that got me into writing. So I read a few books about the Glider Pilot Regiment, then gone on to do bomb group, about the first bomb group, and the Army Air Corps history that I'm working on at the moment. Well, right at the start, what got me on that path was actually, I think like a lot of people, was my grandparents, my nan, who was, I grew up in Birkenhead on the Mersey, and I spent every Sunday with my nan, who would take me on the ferry up and down the River Mersey. And she was a World War II munitions worker. Then I'd get this commentary about what Liverpool looked like in 1940 to 45, about the American convoys, about the air raids, the Liverpool Blitz, Burnwood Air Depot, all of these things. And we went to see the graves of some of the munitions workers who were killed in a German raid. We would do that. We'd go across the river to one of the big Liverpool museums and talk about the Battle of the Atlantic, look at the models of the ships in the museum. And then the perfect end of the day would be get back to her house in Birkenhead, and we'd watch the World at War on TV with our Sunday tea. So you throw Commando comics and Airfix models into the mix, and John Wayne, and there you are. Here we are now talking about it. That's where I am.
Oh, that just sounds absolutely perfect. That's like my idea of a day out. It really is. It's absolutely brilliant. Right, we're going to go on to our questions now then. So, to begin with, can you explain exactly what Schweinfurt represented in the German war economy, particularly its ball bearing production, and why the USAAF leadership identified it as a strategic priority in 1943?
Yeah, so I'll try and give that a bit of context, because many of your listeners will know the whole doctrine of American doctrine for bombing was for daylight precision bombing, and that went right back to the Versailles Treaty, where the American various governments knew that the American public would not wear any bombing of civilians because they had that luxury. They weren't in the Great War. They walked away from Europe after the Versailles Treaty, and any argument for any form of bombing had to be precise. And it evolved over the years. Basically, we don't have to do that. We're not going to do that. So the only way that the US Army Air Corps, as it was in those early days, and before that the Signal Corps, could justify having any form of bomb was, we'll bomb civilian targets. We'll never do that. So they went down the path through the 1920s and into the 30s of this not bombing civilian targets, military targets only, etc., and not needing an air force, really, any great scale that the rearming Europeans were doing. And that then gestates into probably we are going to have some kind of air force, and the people behind, the Billy Mitchell and people like that arguing for the bomber, and the bomber will always get through, as we know. So that evolves steadily into this daylight precision bombing. We need something that can fly higher, faster, fight its way in, and not need fighter escort or pursuit aircraft, as they called them. And that eventually leads to the birth of the B-17s we know, at the B-17C very early. And most people think the B-17 is a World War II aircraft. The first flight is in 1934. So, and it's revolutionary. It's faster. It's the biggest aircraft ever built in America at the time. It's a bit Flash Gordon-esque when you look at the prototype. It's shining chrome silver. It's got guns all over, relatively speaking. And then you marry that up with the Norden bomb sight, which is basically a computerized bomb sight. And you think, okay, we don't need to do what everyone else is doing. We can drop a bomb in a pickle barrel from 20,000 feet or whatever. We're better than that. We don't need fighters. So that's where it gets that running up to World War II. The doctrine that goes with that capability is we'll only hit military targets. We'll go for factories. We'll go for oil plants. We'll go for road junctions. We'll pick out whatever target we want and do minimum damage, but minimum damage to collateral damage to civilian population. But we will target properly military assets. And that doctrine is pretty mature before Pearl Harbor. And there's this argument at the time we won't do when the war breaks out in 1939 in Europe, and they're horrified to see what night bombing is doing and area bombing in inverted commas is doing. And they say, no, we will not do that, even though obviously, as you guys know and your listeners know, that the RAF has had to go down that route, but out of pure necessity, we're not going to do that. So when they do finally get across to this side of the Atlantic and start to look around for targets from the target packs which the Royal Air Force has given them, Harris has given them, every target pack that the US Army Air Force has at the start of the war is generated by the Royal Air Force, and they're handed over. So they start to look for targets. And you asked, what does Schweinfurt and Regensburg mean? Well, when you are trying to do maximum damage with minimum effort, you want some critical choke point, whether that be, as we know later on in the war, oil refineries, rail junctions, there's the oil plan, there's a transport plan, etc. But actually, if you're looking for one thing that will literally grind the war machine to a halt, it's the removal of the ball bearing. Because if we think about it, every aircraft engine, every tank gearbox, every vehicle, even a bicycle has ball bearings. So if you can eliminate ball bearing production, then you can really make a difference, even if it's only for a few months, to any war efforts. So in line with the doctrine of trying to cripple and destroy the Luftwaffe, they come up with this plan, 1943, to hit Schweinfurt, because there are 3 ball bearing factories in Schweinfurt. Schweinfurt produces about, estimates vary, but 10 to 20% of the ball bearings for Germany in one place, in one target. Although it's very deep inside Germany, it becomes, the optimum target for daylight precision bombing, and a great demonstration. And when the Americans line themselves up to do this mission, which is actually mission number 84, they've flown since the start of the war. So prior to this, 12 months before, on the 17th of August, was mission number 1, exactly 12 months before, which was 12 B-17s hitting a rail junction in Rouen. So here we are now, we're going to see 350 B-17s fly deep into Germany and hit the targets they've been talking about since before the war. This is an opportunity to demonstrate to Royal Air Force, the Luftwaffe, the world, that the Americans arrived in the war and this is their capability. So that's what Schweinfurt is. Almost the holy grail in August 1943 for American Air Force commanders.
Just before I ask the next question, I just want to say that how important, and you mentioned it, the combined bombing offensive, how important it is to study the 8th Air Force and what was happening alongside RAF Bomber Command. And certainly growing up, living in East Anglia, Colchester way, Sunday visits were going to places like Lavenham and Boxted and Earl's Cone and learning about the American Air Force, which led to watching the film Memphis Belle, which I know Jane enjoys, and I still do. I still watch it regularly. But just elaborating on that doctrine, you have the USAAF attacking daylight precision, which is distinct from the RAF's mainly area bombing nighttime approach. And the question is, how did the 8th Air Force plan for these long-range daylight missions like Schweinfurt, Regensburg, and what were the key assumptions about accuracy, but also about fighter escort?
Yeah, so obviously in July 1943, when they're planning for the August 43 raid, they're just bringing in drop tanks, 108-gallon drop tanks for the P-47. They've still got some P-38s around, but the Mustang's not around. And one of the key lessons identified in the aftermath of Schweinfurt in August 43 is you can't do this without an escort that goes all the way. How do they plan for it is that the recce's, as I say, the target packs are there. The recce's can be done. Photo recce's are done. They've got pre-war intelligence, all those things. They know where these factories are, and they are going to go from this. Just a question of when they've got the right number of aircraft to do that. And they're going to use deception, because as we know, in both the day and night bombing offensives, deception is important as much as you can. I think it's more difficult to do it in daylight than it is at night with a different picture. So there's an element of this which is political, I think. You've got Churchill, Portal and Harris saying, you guys need to be bombing at night, or why don't you just keep bombing U-boat pens or come and do that? This is silly. You need to join in with Harris, and Harris's famous quote about, if we all hit Berlin, it'll cost us 500 bombers, but the war will be over. That's going on all of the time. And the American determination to have their own bomber offensive is steeled. And this is an opportunity to prove that it works for them. This really does mean a lot to Araika and Spots and all these other Doolittle, all these people. They think that they want to do this and prove that they can do it. And we're going to talk about the mechanics of the raid. That every effort that can be possibly made is put into making this happen and making it a viable plan. RAF B-25s will do diversion raids. RAF Typhoons will be involved in this mission. US Army Air Force B-26 Marauders will be involved. They'll all be hitting targets on the French and Dutch coast at the same time, and it's going to be a 2-phase raids, carefully synchronized. So there's got a single radar signature for a while and chatter, and then the last minute the two forces will separate. All of these things are built into this plan. They've done everything humanly possible to make this work. You can't argue with the logic. But the issue with the American doctrine is you can destroy a target, but you need to go back and destroy it again. So that's Harris's counter argument is, you now need to go back. But, when the originally planning for Regensburg, Schweinfurt was on, the first time they were going to do it, the RAF was going to hit it at night, was the theory, with a 1,000-bomber raid. But Harris never had any intention of doing these things. Harris nodded his head, didn't he, and had his fingers crossed behind his back. He wasn't completely sold on this and was living with his own limitations of what he could do with the Lancasters and the Stirlings and Halifaxes he had.
But Mike, can we go on to the actual missions themselves then on August the 17th and October the 14th, which came to be known as Black Thursday? I'm not giving anything away there, I don't think. These became two of the most famous and costly of the war. Can you walk us through the execution of these missions, the challenges the crews faced in getting to the target in the first place, completing their bombing runs and returning home? And also, what lessons were learned or not learned following the August raid, do you think?
Well, let's start with the August raid. The August raid is a long time in the planning, and one of my favourite stories is a guy called Leonard Spivey, who's the lead navigator for the first bomb group, who gets summoned to Bushy Park with all this brass and gets to 8th Air Force Bomber Command headquarters, which is 5-6 miles from Harris's headquarters. He's never been there before. He meets all the staff and the head of the US Army at the time, this is 3 Eisenhower, and taken out to the garden and goes into a cubicle, which is actually an elevator shaft, and goes down into the command bunker, where he finds a full-scale model of Schweinfurt. And he's told this is the target, what's made there, etc. And he stood looking at the model. He was 22 years of age, and he's the group lead navigator for this mission. And the 381st will be leading the August raid. And he is aware of an RAF guy looking over his shoulder who turns out to be an RAF officer who is a flak expert. And Spivey notes is counting the flak positions around Schweinfurt and says, I count 80 flak guns.
Oh.
And the RAF says, well, these are the ones we know about. These are the 8 or bigger. Around there. The plan is to go in at 14,000 feet, which is really low for the Air Force. Yeah. Not what they do. And he says, well, we're going to be really big targets, a flak. And so he is aware of some days and weeks before the raid of what the target is and what a tough target is going to be. And if you look at the map, it's an 11-hour mission round trip.
Yeah.
If you fly from East Anglia into Schweinfurt and back, it's 11 hours. So what do they do? How can they mitigate against the German threat? Because it's going to be like running into the Valley of Death. The whole route across Belgium, Netherlands, through German airspace, down southern Germany and back out. They're going to be under attack from Luftwaffe Fighter Command pretty much all the way. When you think it's a year after Mission 1, which involved a force of 12 B-17s, that's all they could manage. They've now got 350. They think they can field. So, and it's going to involve, without getting too hung up on unit designations, because they all changed after this, but the 4th Provisional Combat Bomb Wing under a man called Curtis LeMay, who you might have heard of, and the 1st Combat Wing under General Robert Williams. And they will later become the 1st Bomb Division and the 3rd Bomb Division, but that's down the track. And the 2 separate forces, and basically the idea is how can we distill German fighter opposition and how can we disperse it and make it easier for our crews, because this is 5 or 6 hours under attack each way. And if we penetrate all this way into Germany, we're going to have to get out again. The average load for a B-17 air gunner is 7,000 rounds for a turret or gun. So you've got to make that last, and you need the fuel. So basically they go through this planning exercise and say, let's deceive the Joe. So they bring in B-25, RF B-25 missions, US Army Air Force B-26s. So they say, okay, we'll hit other targets at the same time. We'll take off very early in the morning, first light, and we'll launch 2 strikes. The 4th Bomb Wing under Curtis LeMay will go for Regensburg. They're going to go with 127 B-17s and hit the Messerschmitt factories at Regensburg. That's their target, which is on the way, on pretty much the same route. The 1st Bomb Wing under Williams will go with the remainder of the force, 183 B-17s, and carrying 424 tons of bombs. And they're going to go for the 3 factories around Schweinfurt, the ball bearing factories. The idea being that after various other deception plans have played their part, that the Regensburg force will take off 12 minutes ahead of the Schweinfurt force. If they know that the Germans listen to them, so that the minute they start to assemble these squadrons and bomb groups and bomb wings over East Anglia, and usually over Great Yarmouth, the Germans are listening. If you read Heinz Knocker's book, I Flew for the Führer, I can't remember the code name. It is the code name. He said, we always knew as soon as they started to assemble over Great Yarmouth, they were coming our way, and we'd go to cockpit readiness, because we knew. So the idea is that they will assemble. LeMay's 4th Bomb Wing will take off and head off with a 12-minute interval, followed by Williams's 1st Bomb Wing behind, which will be subdivided into another 2 forces. And essentially, the idea is that LeMay will fight his way into Germany. He's first. His 120 odd B-17s will draw all the fighters, will punch their way through. And then when they hit Regensburg, the Germans will expect them to turn around and fly back to East Anglia. So what they'll do, actually, they'll turn south and fly across the Mediterranean to French Algeria. And the Germans will be so confused by this, they'll leave the Regensburg force alone, who will have expended all their ammunition, taken all their damage and fatigue, and they'll get away and fly down to Algeria, where they can rearm, refuel, reconstitute, and be ready to carry out subsequent missions against Italy and fly back to East Anglia in the following days and weeks. That will leave Schweinfurt under attack by Williams's force, the larger force, hitting the 3 factories. They'll have been left alone all the way in, because the Germans will have focused on the Regensburg force, and they will turn back, and they will go back to East Anglia, drawing all the fire, leaving the Regensburg force unmolested, because the Germans will then be focused on them. That's the concept. And then, of course, when they get there, operating to the limit of their range, P-47s from the 353rd, the 4th Fighter Group and the 78th Fighter Group from Duxford will meet them and escort them back. And then when they get to the French coast, there'll be hordes of Spitfires ready to meet them as well and escort them back, which is a great plan in theory. And of course, the problem that plagued the 8th Air Force all through the war, which they never really got to grips with, was the weather. They got good weather forecasts from the RAF forecasters and their own mosquitoes. They had mosquitoes later in the war to go and do this, observation aircraft they sent out, etc. But the whole US doctrine was based on being able to see the target with your Norden bomb sight to drop it. But also, if you're going to fly, which the RAF didn't have that problem later in the war, if you're going to fly in a combat box and stack multiple combat boxes of aircraft together safely, you need to be able to see each other. So on the morning of the raid, East Anglia's got fog. Funny old thing. Here I am sat in Suffolk, and this morning was foggy, and most morning. And this is immediately a problem, because the clock's ticking, because LeMay and his 4th Bomb Wing have to get to Africa. They're supposed to take off at 5 a.m, and every hour there's a delay and a delay and a delay. So the crews at Ridgewell, at Thorpe Abbotts, all these various airfields are waiting. The Red Cross girls are bringing spam sandwiches out to them and donuts and all the rest of it, but they're still setting the aircraft. And of course, now they know the target. They've seen that big, long red ribbon on the map. They know where they're going. Anxiety's kicking in. And of course, there's been some radio traffic, so the Luftwaffe are aware that something's afoot. So it starts to become a problem. And LeMay has an issue. He can't leave pretty much later than 8 a.m. So his focus for his bomb wing has been instrument flying and takeoffs. So he's trained his crews to take off in poor visibility using their instruments, which most American bomb groups don't need to do. And consequently, haven't done. They've focused on tight formation flying. Combat box is the be-all and end-all, because you've got your interlocking arcs of fire. But also, it gives you more accurate bombing. If we fly in a tight combat box as a squadron, and stack our squadrons up together, then when one guy drops, we all drop our bombs, we get more accurate bombing. But you need to be able to assemble in daylight to do that. Not fog, not cloud. And you need clear skies over East Anglia, clear skies over the North Sea, and you need clear skies over the target. So, of course, on August 17th, 1943, to use a technical term, East Anglia is clagged in. So LeMay makes the conclusion to go. So the Regensburg force takes off and heads off for the target. The Germans log in their records that they start to hear radio traffic at 0600 hours, and the fourth bomb wing starts to take off at 0800. He can't wait any longer, and they're in the air. The complete bomb wing is launched. All 127 aircraft are in the air by 9:35, and they cross the coast into the Netherlands and Belgium at 10 o'clock. And the first fighters hit them at 10:05. So meanwhile, the Schweinfurt force is still sat on their airfields and will be for 5 hours. So what should have been a 12-minute interval is now a 5-hour gap. So the Regensburg force was fighting its way through. They lose 13 B-17s on the way, just getting to the target over Europe. They're hit constantly by the Germans who are now where they are. And there's no Schweinfurt force behind them. So they're going to fight their way through the target. And basically they will get to the target, but two bomb groups have to turn around and go round again to make the attack. So they face resolute defence, because we've got to remember that they're attacking a Messerschmitt factory. All German aircraft factories had their own defence flights, as well as the organised German forces around them. So the test pilots in each factory had a little flight of their own 109s to defend the factory, and the factory workers were all trained to operate anti-aircraft guns. So they all came out to fight their battle. And they're over the target at 11:48 hours. The Schweinfurt force is nowhere to be seen. It's 5 hours behind. So, yes, it's not great. Not great at all. But the Regensburg force hit the target and hit it well. Their bombs are on target and they turn away. They report that they've got 4 men killed in action, because they're the ones still on the aircraft or have been seen to have been killed. 200 people are missing. 200 aircrew are missing. So and they've got 9 wounded. 2 aircraft crashed in Switzerland, and 8 have ditched in the Mediterranean because they ran out of fuel. So they dropped 299 bombs on Regensburg. So they lose a total of 24 B-17s and 50 are damaged. Not beyond repair, but they won't fly again for days or weeks out of 127 aircraft. So it's and they claim to have shot down 23 German fighters. But, what's notorious about the daylight battle is, less so than the night battle, is that if you're in a mass formation, there's 10 machine gunners shooting at the same target. They're all going to claim that target. So verification of that always different. Figures the German figures are often much, much different by a huge margin. So yeah, first heavy bomb wing finally take off, and they arrive over 5 hours after the Regensburg force. They arrive over the target at 14:59. So if you think that LeMay's bomb wing was over Regensburg at 11 o'clock, these guys are arriving at 3 o'clock over the target. So what do we think the Luftwaffe fighter force has been doing meanwhile? Landing, rearming, refueling, setting themselves up and bringing in more reinforcements from all over the Reich to mass. Because this is something that will change by October, but the Germans are beginning to realise that they need to pre-position fuel and ammunition at active airfields so that they can shift their fighters around as they need to do so. The fighter controllers at Dahlen, outside Arnhem, have coordinated this. So they're waiting for the second force as they cross the coast, and they know the Regensburg force has gone to the south, so they've got nothing to worry about. There's no distraction from the Regensburg force. They've gone to Algiers. They're long gone. So all the Luftwaffe focus is on this force of 183 B-17s. And as soon as the fighter escort turns away, it's a running battle all the way to Schweinfurt. So it's 9 hours of fighting and fighting all the way through. The mission, Regensburg and Schweinfurt losses combined will be 60 B-17s destroyed, crashed or gone down. And another 4 written off as damaged beyond repair. And the initial figures will be 7 killed in action, 552 total missing across both targets, and 21 wounded. When you do the maths, that's 2 complete bomb groups lost. So, and for Schweinfurt, only 1 in 9 bombs is on target. They're harried all the way in. The fighter escort RV doesn't go well, so the P-47s don't marry up with them on the way in, so they're even more vulnerable than they were. They do drop 424 tons of bombs, but most of it misses the target. The fighters that are sent to escort them, so the P-47s and the Spitfires, they shoot down 19 German fighters in a running battle that lasts from 10:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the afternoon along the Schweinfurt route, in and out. So it's a ferocious battle. It's a bitter blow. And when the photo recce comes back from Schweinfurt, they realise that it's not been an effective raid, nowhere near what it should have been. And the losses are just unsustainable. 60 aircraft, it's horrendous. And it brings into question the whole viability of daylight bombing. As predicted by Harris and Portal and everybody else. That even with a fighter escort to a certain point, once that fighter escort turns away, because what the Germans realise is, are getting good at by the summer of 1943 is, once the American fighters have gone, and RAF fighters have gone, they can bring in things like Me-110s, Ju-88.
Yeah.
Slower twin-engine aircraft that can stand off, because the Messerschmitt 110 can actually do what it's designed to do. With its 20mm cannon, it can outrange the 50 caliber guns on the B-17. They can strap rockets on them, mortars on them, etc. Break up the formation. So it's a bloodbath.
Yeah.
Calls into question the whole American daylight precision doctrine, and they don't really recover until the autumn. There's a lot of bad weather, thankfully, and they've got to reconstitute the aircraft losses they've done, the crew losses. And if you think about this, when we did the analysis, Paul Bingley and I, for Bomb Group, 50% of the 381st Bomb Group crews were replacements who flew on that mission. There were already replacements from losses earlier in the summer. So 50% of the Bomb Group had already been casualties and had been replaced. So when you get to the end of the summer of 43 into the autumn, number of the Bomb Groups have 101% losses. So the attrition is staggering. It's just not sustainable. And they realise that. So what can they do? So they still have to hit these targets. And it's all part of the build up to D-Day in 1944. And they've got to destroy the Luftwaffe. So they tried again. They tried to hit Schweinfurt again in October, which becomes known as Black Thursday. The irony is they'll lose the same number of aircraft. 60 B-17s shot down in October, Black Thursday. And what's changed? Well, the weather's still a major factor, as you would expect in October. The Americans try all kinds of different things with their formations and the way they manage the attack to make it better, more deception, etc. Well, the enemy gets a vote. The Germans have got better. By October 43, they are far more coordinated. They've tightened up the control, and it's rather like a reverse through the Looking Glass Battle of Britain scenario now.
Yeah.
Where they are operating over their own territory. They've sorted out their command and control. They brought in more fighters. They've got their doctrine. And although they are suffering the same degree of attrition as the Americans, and they have real problems with that, at this point in the war, they're still in it. And they can coordinate their fighters a lot better. And the Mustang's not there. I would say the big difference is, although the losses are the same, is the Germans have got better. The Americans have got better, but the Germans have really gone to town and have organised their fighter defences and their flak defences far more, and have learned to concentrate force against these incoming raids from where and when to hit them and how to hit them. And Garland and Goering have had their friction, but Garland has said, picking off lone bombers, forget that. We need to concentrate forces, hit the lead group, hit that group till it's gone, and then hit another one. So the target is still vital. They're more accurate on the second raid. I still think, personally, looking back, the American doctrine and tactics were correct. It's just how they prosecuted those missions and how they went about it. The Air Force lost more men than the US Marine Corps did in its island hopping campaign in the Pacific. So, what was your expectation of survival? You're going to fly these initial 25 missions, then it goes to 30, then it goes to 35, because you can turn out as many aircraft as you like, but you need the crews. So there's a degree of fatigue.
So the Schweinfurt missions came at a heavy price in aircraft and aircrew. So how significant were the losses, and how did they affect strategy and planning immediately afterwards? I'm thinking both operationally, but also in terms of morale on the ground and back home in the States. Are there any particular crews or actions or moments from these raids that really stand out to you as well, that are sort of especially vivid or emblematic of what these crews went through?
I think it's a good question. To start, both raids had a huge impact on the planning aspect of what was achieved. The simple mathematics of what could be achieved with what was left of that raid. And the weather was closing in the October of 43 and would be horrendous all through December. And of course, our ICA was becoming increasingly the subject of frustration for Carl Spots, and he would ultimately be promoted upstairs in January of 44. And you could argue that at the point where he had just begun to get the resources, the numbers of aircraft, and he was about to get the P-51 in the winter of 43, spring of 44, he was moved, and Doolittle was brought in to take his place. So I would say that these deep penetration raids and the defensive mentality that ICA had about protecting the bombers above all else had run out of road. Whether we think that's fair or unfair, that's the fact that he was moved on. So Doolittle comes in, and the first thing he does is, quite famously, he goes to American Fighter Command headquarters and sees the mission statement. Our mission is to bring the bombers back alive. And he said, take that down. Our mission is to destroy the Luftwaffe. But he's got the tools to do it, which he never really had. So I think it had a massive effect on the bomber crews. You look at all the bomb groups involved took very heavy losses. In some cases, more than 50%, and it took quite a few weeks to get them back. What we don't see really is the huge numbers of aircraft that couldn't fly because they were so badly damaged. They got back. The B-17 was renowned for its durability and its resilience. They got back to the airfield, but they weren't going anywhere. So into the winter of 43, it really does not quite take them out of the war, but reduces the reach and the effectiveness of the 8th. And they switch to what they call milk runs, bombing U-boat pens on the North French coast and hitting airfields. And psychologically, they're given German airfields to hit so they can hit back at the Luftwaffe themselves. And that will go on right through the winter of 43 into 44. So there's some doubt then, and there's even discussions in the background about maybe we should try this night bombing lark. But then, of course, Point Blank is looming, Normandy is looming, and Doolittle is given the job of putting some zing up. The man who bombed Tokyo wants to be the man who bombed Berlin. So he enters stage left. So I think Schweinfurt Regensburg in August has a massive effect on both sides of the argument, and October reinforces that point.
So final question, wrapping things up, really looking at how the Schweinfurt raids are remembered today. I mean, we've had the depiction in Masters of the Air, for example, recently, but in terms of how it's remembered in the US and also among historians of the air war, what the discussions are, what do they represent in terms of the USAAF identity, strategic bombing doctrine, as well as the broader Allied air campaign? Where does it all fit?
Question.
That's why I wanted to ask it.
Yeah. I think not many. We do talk about Black Thursday, but for me, the August raid is the one. Is that point where, for me, it's where the Americans say, "This is what we're going to do. This is the epitome of what we want to do," and the Luftwaffe give them a real good beating. But the 8th Air Force veterans and everybody else, they never turned back on any raid. They never turned back. So I think it just shows a degree of naivety at the start. And overwhelming self-belief in the B-17, the Norden bomb site, the daylight precision bombing, the combat box, all of that. But, the Luftwaffe gets a vote. So I think the legacy of Schweinfurt is, to most people, it epitomizes what American daylight bombing and doctrine was and what the air war was about. Things would change. A year later in August 44, the war would still be going, but the boot would be on the other foot. The attrition would be massively affecting the Germans. To me, it just epitomizes, the images of those B-17 combat boxes and streams of trails in the blue sky going into this battle deep into Germany, when everyone said it can't be done, and still doing it. So I think if you want to understand the war at the time, the air war for the Americans at the time, I think Middlebrook's book is excellent.
Yeah.
All kinds of veteran accounts to read. But for me, the one to read is Martin Middlebrook's book, the way he dissects it, humanizes it as well, and the whole thing when you step away from it. And so, if you want to understand the American psyche in the air war, the bombing war, read about Schweinfurt.
Yeah.
And I've shared the coach with Don Miller and all these other people who were guys who made Masters of the Air, etc. And for them, that is the moment.
The raid. Yeah.
Sorry, Jane, you going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that's a really in-depth dissection of the whole thing, actually. Yeah, it really gives you lots of food for thought, doesn't it? And God, you just can't even imagine, really, can you? I mean, being aboard those aircraft and just flying through that, it's just, unimaginable.
And when you start digging into some of these people, it's like when the 95th Bomb Group, not in this raid, different raid, they attack Kiel in 43. Their brigadier is Nathan Bedford Forrest III, Junior the Third. Nathan Bedford, great grandson of the Confederate cavalry commander. And he's like, I've got a better idea in the combat box. Let's attack a line abreast. We can use all our guns, blah blah blah. And I've got this new gun oil which is better. And the Curtis LeMay, who's in the same bomb wing, says, "This is barking." And all his squadron commander say, "No, this won't work." And they do it, and they lose 11 aircraft, including his aircraft. He gets shot down, goes down in flames. It's just the personalities. Because I don't know why it's different to the night bombing. Because it's only when you get to something like Chastise or something or a Amiens raid where you see that squadrons operating together and RAF individual commanders leading in that way. It's interesting to see, and they're all trying these new tactics out, and they just route one. Let's do it this way.
I think that's a key point. They are learning this, aren't they? I know it.
Yeah.
It's all new. We can look at it with hindsight, but it is new, completely new.
I think when I go back to the Somme analogy, when I take people to the Somme, they say, "Well, how did it go so wrong in 1916?" None of these people in August 1914 were in the army. How do you grow an army of 1 million people in 2 years? And when you've grown it and given them all the uniforms and set them in the rank structure, what's the corporate level of knowledge from CO down to private soldier? Who's seen what's the experience, combat experience level across that whole rank structure? It's the same. So when you look up and something goes wrong, the guy above you doesn't know any more than you do. And so it goes on. So you need to do something simple and straightforward. And the design things, even when they looked at the B-17 as a night bomber, the RAF said it's not suitable.
Yeah.
For various reasons, where the guns were and all this kind of stuff. When I do the Masters of the Air tour with American groups, I take them to see the Lancaster this is a bomber.
Mike, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights into Schweinfurt, Regensburg, etc., as well as the role of the US Air Force. These missions remind us of both the ambition and the human cost of strategic bombing, and how the different approaches of the USAAF and RAF complemented and sometimes challenged one another in the wider air war. And that then goes for me to say thank you to everyone who has listened. If you've been enjoying Never Mind the Dambusters, the best way you can support us is by leaving a rating or review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a moment, but it really helps others discover the show. If you'd like to go a step further, you can support the podcast for as little as £2.40 or $3 a month, helping us cover production costs and hosting costs. Links can be found in the show notes. We'd also love to hear from you, so feel free to join the conversation in our Facebook group or connect with us via social media. In next week's episode, we'll be talking to former RAF Harrier pilot Matt Doncaster about bombing technology and looking at the role of the bomb aimer in particular. We'll be back soon with more stories and perspectives from Bomber Command and Allied Air Operations. And until then, take care and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.